Someone on Ask Reddit asked, why do you think we have so many school shootings in America? Serious tag. And to that I responded, when will society and culture actually make practicing human connection the standard instead of being apathetic? To elaborate on that, I wrote a lot. So if you're interested in listening, sit down, lay back, get some popcorn. I blame people not taking accountability for their apathy and being an inhuman asshole as the standard for society. The internet faking intimacy and connection, and the ignorance and avoidance of serious topics, the backlash and dismissal of mental health. No one can mention anything that isn't, I feel great all the time, without some cocky asshole commenting you need help, or you're depressed, or you take things way too seriously, don't be a downer, or some other judgment because people don't listen or think for themselves anymore. The school system is broken entirely as well, promoting treating children as prisoners, not focusing on actual education, or promoting creativity to push self-imposed motivation and create ambition, inspiring hope, which would make kinder human beings. Teachers are being drained, one of the biggest misconceptions, occasional educators being the phrase. The system basically allows people to use public education as a babysitting service with no behavior restrictions or consequences. Socially, everything is backwards. Suicide rates are up, and people continue to do and say stupid things like suicide is contagious. It's not. You're just ignorant. Therapists and psychiatrists spend their lives in school instead of actually having any real-life experience, so they barely know how to confront or address topics anymore. They see humans as cases, and instead of people with hearts who don't need labels. Compassion and honest communication is gone. Selflessness is gone. Deceit and manipulation is the way of the world and standards nowadays. Friendships are made out of convenience, breeding cowards, instead of people with strong characters, making finding a partner a shallow process on the surface as well. Objective thinking is rare, but defending how you're right is what's popular. Popularity is decided based on who's the loudest and most dramatic, shifting the attention of people where it doesn't need to be. So when a girl says, I was abused, whether it's emotionally, mentally, or physically, people choose to ignore it if there's no immediate evidence, silencing anyone who does suffer from abuse in any kind of relationship, be it their gender, be it family, friends, etc. Because the world encourages abuse. Yet when a guy says, no, I didn't, people are quick to agree, because it means less thinking and work for them. Needless to say, being analytic is not people's strong suit whatsoever, and people who are, for example, those with ADHD are seen as non-existent because it's a disorder that doesn't exist. We all overthink. I'm going to give a tad more detail now, then I'll let you know when I move on. Speaking from experience as someone who has been abused by people who were unaware of their borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, bipolar and schizophrenic disorders until I brought it up, and then they continued a path of self-destruction from that point on, which I left. People don't mention abuse as a product of feeling entitled, not needing more love to take advantage of. So the double-edged sword becomes reach out for help, but don't be too specific because then you're deemed as biased. Or you choose the wrong ones. Maybe it's your type. Use are brainwashed. People also don't mention how consequences seem to never take place, but rewards, for the lack of a better phrase, for bad behavior do. On another hand, people don't care to know the correct terminology because speaking before you think has declined. Yet when a show, novel, Oscar-winning film, or song by someone who takes the time to focus on lyrics like Eminem is shared, people call him a lyrical acrobat. When a show is released with an outcast of a character like Elliot from Mr. Robot, people say, I would have helped. Then they turn their television off, or Netflix off, go to sleep, and never bat an eye at the thought again. It's a double-edged sword, a double standard there. Moving on. Adults set horrible examples because they didn't develop the ability to be introspective from growing up in a cold, distant, socially enabling, detached society, enabling detachment, and the me before anyone else approach. Basically, no one cares about each other. Or so that's what people say and want others to believe, because being human, the very thing that you are, is somehow morphed into weakness into people's eyes. You can't even acknowledge a serious conversation without someone needing to mock it or lighten the mood because it's too much for them to push any responsibility onto themselves. And then there are people like me who use our voice and are told half the time we're arrogant for thinking we're better, for actually saying we care, or negative for mentioning the world defies logic. And we feel lost and trapped because the world is in fact lonely and no one does anything about it. Knowing all of this will drive anyone mad. It's dangerous and no one person can change it. I, as a 22-year-old female, won't, because all I'll get told is to shut up and not play the role of a victim, or grow up, let go, ignore it, etc. Then there's the gun regulation issue. Politics, wealth, greed, the legal system. It's everything and everyone at the same time. It starts an endless loop of asking yourself, what's the point? And most brain-dead people still have to rely on social status, religion, or a tragedy to force themselves into being a half-assed human that will lie, choose themselves, be selfish, and not think twice in the process behind closed doors. Against all logic of improving themselves and the world. People's priorities are backwards. People would rather focus on de-stressing, vacation time, money, protecting themselves, family, situational friends that they have until they fall/drift apart than having their purpose in life to actually be a fucking decent human being that faces their own weaknesses and initiates reaching out to others, especially when it's inconvenient and uncomfortable consistently, and not just once to feel like you did a good deed. I've battled asking myself what I can do when all my efforts constantly go to shit, and all my life as this reality of the world has been presented to me, shoved in my face since grade school. And I've talked about it unknowingly, and no one bats an eye, no one cares, and then someone commits suicide. Or shoots people, and the responses are stupidly predictable. If only we would have known. If only he or she would have told us. They were a great friend. The signs are always there, no matter how cheery or okay a person seems. You're just too focused on yourself to give a shit and educate yourself because you're convinced you fall into the majority of people where someone else can handle it for you and you'll be fine until real life happens. And then it's, oh my god, another shooting, another suicide. But how? There are so many different types of shooters. Some are insane, some are disturbed, some are depressed, some are psychopaths, some angry, some from seemingly loving families. It's not easy to pin the reason on the individual because there are so many starting points. America is very big on, if you just work hard, you'll find success. But the result of that is often, if you don't succeed, it's your own fault because you are a failure. So where do you go from there? Why does nobody talk about the fact that minor things in life, like starting a conversation, is difficult nowadays? Why does nobody talk about the fact that driving a car can make a person anxious? And that's okay. Not having high grades in school is okay. Doing the bare minimum is difficult because clearly a lot of people do less than the bare minimum. The system is flawed. The human race is flawed. And you can't and shouldn't always rely on other people to think, or more quote-unquote fit to take care of shit. You have to do it yourself. You have to choose to be less of a coward, masked behind insecurity, self-doubt, fear, and confusement. That creates confinement for yourself and everybody else. I myself can't change the world either. I can and have done a lot, but I need help to do it. With that said, there will always be desperate and disturbed people, no matter how good your mental health services are. These people will sometimes reach a tipping point where they consider taking drastic action, either harming themselves or harming others. There is no system that will ever be good enough that results in zero desperate or disturbed people. However, the tipping point frequently does not last very long, but it will when people can't even speak up about feeling lost and stigmas are attached. Take those who are suicidal, for example. When someone reaches out for help, it's your job to take the initiative and research on how you can word yourself properly. Behave, respond, instead of just reacting and saying, I don't know what to say, or I'm not good at this, or some generic phrase like, it'll get better. Because talking to a wall is a feeling that person wants to decrease, and hearing that and seeing that this interest and lack of consistency makes everything worse. I can start a series here, sharing personal experiences and talking about real-world experiences to educate whoever is interested in listening about mental health and personality disorders. I can talk about eating and binging disorders. I can discuss how to approach situations better, how to start the process of being introspective and doing something yourself, such as breaking apart anxiety, such as social, situational, and generalized anxiety disorder, and share the people who have wronged me to make other people feel like they can relate. And when I say share people who have wronged me, I don't mean sharing names. That'll be my personal decision to make, and I'll handle those consequences depending on what I decide, because I acknowledge and I accept what's to come. But what I mean is giving some people hope, some sort of platform to understand that even though YouTube has gone downhill with monetization and censoring things, making things kid-friendly, appropriate, and caring more about money than their users, that there are specific examples, at least in my life, where I've gone through things that don't necessarily fall into the category of normal or average. I've gone through things that are severe, traumatic. They're not friendly, they're not cute, they're not sweet, they're not innocent. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay, because there shouldn't be an average. And most importantly, what I mean by share is sharing resources and methods and examples, like I said previously, on how to improve for anyone that needs any type of help. With that said, I'm not trying to start a cult or some sort of drastic following. Just trying to provide use, productive use. But mine or anyone else's life is not your entertainment reel to exploit, judge, assume, or twist. So the question is again, when will society and culture actually make practicing human connection the standard instead of being apathetic? Also, if anyone tries to find my Reddit account without asking if I can make one attached to this channel, it's simple. I'll delete it. Thank you.